Hi there, hello, salut, bonjour. I hope life is treating you well wherever you're watching from at the moment. You could be in Deïdo, Douala, Longkat in Yaoundé, somewhere in Rumdaja, Pumpumre Garoua, Konsamba. It could be even in Dubai, Central Basha. Why not in Maryland, somewhere in Laurel, DC, Virginia. Take you right up to places like Accra, Ghana, Ikoyi, Lagos. I know so many Cameroonians, friends of Cameroon, are watching across the globe. Thank you so much for joining this platform. Thank you for subscribing to this channel. Thank you for making sure you leave your comments and your thoughts. We take them very seriously. I read them and I understand and learn from you. And also for hitting that thumbs up button because it helps YouTube to recommend to like-minded people. For sharing this platform across your different circles, it helps us grow. We're growing every day because of you. Thank you so much. And those of you that take the time to send us money through the button that is called Super Thanks, again, we don't take that for granted. God will richly bless you, and may your sources and resources never tarry. Thank you. We take your generosity very seriously, and to continue to do the work we do on this platform. We're keeping you up to date with things that are happening in Cameroon, and every day you wake up, there's a new story. Sometimes different faces, different angles. And an election took place on October 12, 2025. And since then, the country has been going through different transformations. And people, I think, are fed up because they say they voted for change on October 12. But that change is yet to come. And we are lending our voice to the process, bringing a civic education perspective and continuously sharing some public discussions that will help other Cameroonians today and in the future. Because what we're doing is leaving our footprints on the sands of time. And thank you for being part of this process. And today is not going to be different. It's the 12th day of December 2025. And we start off with issues and things that happened in Douala in the early hours of Thursday, December 11th. We continuously gather information on the ground, and we want to bring you the facts of the top. Because as you know, Cameroon is still living through a post-electoral crisis. We've seen the Meiganga road blockade, the bulldozers, the death of Anissa Ekane. We've talked about the truck drivers listing 95 checkpoints or more between Ngaoundéré and Meiganga alone, each one taking a little something from their pockets. Today, we come back to the same story, but with another face. Not a truck driver this time around, a motorbike rider in Douala, a young man just trying to earn his daily bread. And once again, between him and survival stands a uniform and a code. Today, the question is, when a moto-taxi rider is shot over 25,000 francs code, what does that say about the kind of republic Cameroon has become? This is not just about Douala. It is about Meiganga, Mutengene, about the elections, about the state itself. Now, let's break it down. Early in the morning, in the area of Akwa Nord near Deïdo in Douala, a moto-taxi rider stops by the roadside. Some say he stopped to urinate. Others say he was already pulled over. A police pickup arrives. Routine control, we are told. The officers ask for his papers. He does not have everything in order. And that already is a whole chapter of poverty and broken administration that we will come back to. From there, the script becomes sadly familiar. The officer allegedly asks for 25,000 francs CFA. The moto-taxi rider says he does not have that kind of money at 5 a.m. He offers 5,000 to 6,000 francs CFA, what they call le code. The bribe everybody in the street understands, but nobody across Yaoundé who is supposed to be working at the treasury will ever see that in the budget. There is an argument. They pull on the bike. The officer reportedly tries to move the motorcycle towards impound. At some point, instead of de-escalating, the officer draws his gun. A shot is fired. A young man falls. From that moment, the story is no longer between two people. The news spreads like wildfire through Douala. Moto-taxi networks are informed. They shot one of us. By 7 to 8 a.m., moto-taxi riders from different quarters are converging towards École Publique Deïdo and nearby roundabouts. Some of them believe their colleague is already dead. Others say he's fighting for his life in Laquintinie Hospital in Douala, in a city where motor-taxis are almost the only way for ordinary people to move. This is not a small crowd. We are talking about a sector that by some counts nears 100,000 riders in Douala alone. From there on, the riders start to organize an improvised procession to Laquintinie. We are going to see with our own eyes if he is alive or dead, they chant. At that point, the state moves in. Anti-riot police trucks arrive, pickups, gendarmes, and then the famous water cannon truck nicknamed Mami Wata. The machine that does not negotiate, it just sprays. The forces of order disperse the riders with jets of water, tear gas in some areas. The objective is clear: prevent thousands of motor taxis from moving as a block towards the hospital and turning Douala into another Meiganga. But something else also happens that is important. The subdivisional officer of District 1 comes down to the scene, not to back orders from a distance, but to face the riders. According to witnesses, he shows them a video on his phone, insisting, "Your colleague is alive. He is at Laquintinie. He's being taken care of." The motor-taxi riders do not believe him. Why? Because in today's Cameroon, there is a crisis of trust between the governed and those who govern. So they insist, "We want to send our own delegation to the hospital." Eventually, 2, then more riders are allowed to go to Laquintinie. They come back and confirm the young man, identified by some as Mustafa Sali, is alive and in care. Tension goes down a notch, but the anger is still there because deep down, everyone understands something. The problem is not only the bullet, the problem is the system that made the bullet possible. Let us widen the frame a little bit from Douala to Meiganga, checkpoints as a business model. This is not just an isolated case. In the Meiganga episode, truck drivers listed dozens of checkpoints between Gaoundéré and the south, each one taking its own small share. Some drivers mentioned around 95 controls on one corridor alone. Ask any bus driver, truck driver, or motor taxi rider in Cameroon what a checkpoint means, and they will tell you it is not primarily about safety. It is not primarily about roadworthiness. It is about money. We have created a parallel fiscal system where uniforms replace tax forms and where the collection goes into pockets and private Ndjangi, not into public hospitals and schools. In the Douala case, the magic number was 25,000 francs CFA. The riders explained it clearly. Before, when syndicates or trade unions were allowed to run some controls, certain leaders allegedly took 15, 20 or 25,000 per bike. So what happened? Police officers saw that money and said, "Why are we only taking 1,000 or 2,000 francs? There is gold here." And from there on, the unofficial market price went up to 25,000 francs for the police too. One motor taxi union worker calls it by its name. This is not control. This is aggression. The code, the bribe, is sometimes openly negotiated on the roadside. 5,000 from the rider, 25,000 requested by the police officer. The difference between those two numbers is the distance between law and extortion. Now, I want you to think about this. A motor taxi rider in Douala typically has a daily receipt to pay to the owner of the bike, maybe 3,000 to 4,000 francs CFA. He must also eat, maybe support a family, maybe pay rent. When you stop him at 5 a.m. and demand 25,000, you are asking him to hand over money he has not even yet made. Money he may not even make the entire day. That is how frustration accumulates every night, every week, every month. And as one of the union workers puts it very well. L'accumulation de frustration est le carburant de la révolte. Simple terms, the accumulation of frustration is the fuel of revolt. Now, place that on top of post-electoral crisis, where protesters have been killed in different cities. People feel their vote has not been respected. Whole neighborhoods have tasted tear gas and live bullets. You now have a country where every checkpoint is a potential spark. In fact, let's talk about these 25,000 francs and the word Ndjangi. Because in Cameroon culture, Ndjangi is something noble, a community saving circle, a way for some people to pool money, to help each other build a house, pay school fees, run projects, start small businesses. But in this context, Ndjangi has been twisted. And what we see on the ground is this. Some officers organize themselves into informal money pools based on daily harvest from controls. Every night, they must bring something back, 10, 15, 25, 50,000 from drivers, Moto-Taxi, taxis, buses, trucks. And at the end of the week or month, they share, like tontine as they call it, but funded by fear. This is not just corruption. It is organized racketeering using state uniforms. And it has real consequences. The first of which the state loses twice. First, because the money never enters the public coffers. Second, because the people come to see the state itself as a predator, not a protector. Secondly, law-abiding efforts are undermined. In Douala, for example, the mayor has reportedly launched an operation to identify Moto-Taxi riders and even offered 5,000 free permits, joined by 1,000 more from the Minister of Housing to formalize the sector. Let's not talk about the reason why the sector even exists in the first place. But then, thousands have already enrolled. And when an identified rider with a vest and a number is stopped, some officers still say, we don't care about that. Show us insurance, show us money. Meaning that no matter how correct, how regularized you are, the officer would always find a reason to extort you, to ask for money. And the third consequence is this: trust collapses. So when the sous-prefect shows up with a video of the wounded rider alive, people do not believe him. Because if the state is ready to lie about small things, why would it tell the truth about bullets and ballots? At that point, you are no longer talking about one bad officer. You're looking at a systemic problem that connects checkpoint corruption, poverty and informal work, and the credibility of the entire political system. Now, let's talk about a civic education angle on policing. Because we've heard from analysts and critics on security matters, and it is very clear that nationally and internationally, and Cameroon itself has been trained on this, there is a doctrine called democratic crowd management. And one of its core principles is simple. For crowd control and routine controls, you do not use live ammunition on civilians. When a citizen dies because a traffic control, that is not just a dérapage, as they call it, a slip. It is a failure of doctrine, training, and command. In the past, in all fairness, during the 2018 post-election crisis, because Cameroon has known its fair share, we were able to see a semblance of crowd management. You know, the officers used shields, batons, tear gas, negotiation tactics, without the same amount. Although we do know that at some point they became again brutal. As we know, maybe not just them, but again the elements of Bataillon Intervention Rapide or other forces that we cannot really identify, because we do know that people like Maître Michel Ndoki was shot, Professor Alain Foguet, I think Celestin Jamen, and again it was about the MRC. And now we have the FSNC of Issa Juma Bakari, although it's more broad because many more Cameroonians even voted for the FSNC without belonging because they wanted change. And so in this case, we saw the mass arrest and live ammunition used again. So when we say in all fairness, we're trying to point to a moment in Cameroon history where we actually saw some police officers demonstrate some restraint. So when a police officer pulls a gun on a motor-taxi rider over paperwork and 25,000 francs CFA, we must ask these questions. What training did he receive? What supervision? Who is responsible for his conduct? And what signal will the hierarchy send this time? If this becomes just another internal disciplinary issue with no transparent investigation, the message is clear. Your life is worth less than our Ndjangi. That is not a message a republic can afford to send to tens of thousands of young men on motorcycles who move the entire city every day. Now, let's do a deep dive into the moto-taxi itself and do an X-ray of the sector, because it is a lifeline and a threat in the same body. And we've listened to activists and other analysts on the subject matter related to how taxis or moto-taxis in particular have become a threat to society in Cameroon. And that is why every time there is an issue in society, they are the first to be targeted. We do know that as soon as there were post-electoral crisis, the DOs, the SDOs, and all the administrators were the first to hit hard and say they are banning taxi activity, motor taxi riders from somewhere around 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. And the reason being that they accuse motor taxi riders for all the different crimes that happen overnight. And we're here to dissect a few of them, because there are many decent riders who have prevented robberies, chased down thieves, and even risked their own lives to help victims. But there are also what they call brebis galeuses, the bad apples, and even foreigners who they say use bikes to commit robberies, kidnappings, and assaults. So we must hold two truths at the same time. Number one, motor taxis are a lifeline. In cities like Douala, with poor public transport and endless traffic jams, it is almost impossible to live without them. They are an answer to unemployment, to lack of buses, to bad urban planning. Secondly, motor taxis also carry real security risk. Many serious robberies, especially at night, involve motorcycles. Some riders are not identified, not trained, not insured, not documented. Although insurance is a different story, because the sector itself, according to the trade unionists, those that are protecting the different unions that bikers or motor taxis belong to, are saying clearly that insurers would not insure them for all the different instances you would expect them to be involved in an accident. And therefore they are obliged to take personal life insurance, and it doesn't apply to third-party collision, because it seems as if the state would need to get involved in order to regulate the insurance sector that affects motor taxis in Cameroon. And this is an aside. We're going to tell you about solutions in a moment, because these solutions, we do know that the 43-year-old regime in Yaoundé has no intention to implement any of this. That is a fact. Why? Because it hasn't done so in the past. We do hope that for the new Cameroon that we all believe will come up at some point when Cameroonians take their destiny in their own hands, then they'll be able to implement many of the changes that will help the country to emerge. So that is just an aside. But we move on to say that is exactly why identification and formalization are key. Even though at the moment we are still suffocating with the situation, at least some form of identification and formalization is key. And on this, the Motor Taxi Union also has a lot of homework, and the different unions, because they are factions, they have a lot of homework to do. They must stop acting as simple intermediaries of money between riders and authorities, because some of them are comfortable and they've been accused to align themselves with the system in place, and they sometimes use their brothers that ride on motorbikes to run campaigns for the ruling CPDM party, because they are all colluded in the sense where they are the first that are gathered together. And if there's anyone that is ever manipulated, we can easily say the regime knows how to give them money and treats in order to get them convinced. But they start with the top. They identify their leaders and send them to go convince that they can vote for the ruling civilian party. And motorbike riders themselves, moto-taxi riders themselves have decried this thing, that some union presidents spend their whole time only to convince people to align with the regime, because whenever there's an issue in society, they are the first target. And that is what we've been telling you. But again, they must genuinely defend their members and clean their own ranks. Yes, they must denounce the criminals using their vest and their name. And they must also not be aligned with the system and actually fight to protect the sector, even though it's already a sector that is very porous and should not have been existing in the first place if the government had done what it takes to organize the city. Because once upon a time, there was what they called Sotuk, which was another bus system, public transit system, in which some would say, oh, of course, the city used to be less populated than it is today. Why did it become populated? If the rural areas were developed and had their farm to market roads and other amenities, people would not have to flock the urban centers. And again, the argument is moot, because in governance, you anticipate, and that is why you need statistics to know the population density, to know how to manage, your population and provide amenities that correspond to the population itself. But that is a story for another day. So we're saying that because if they don't have this form of identification and cleanup within the ranks of the motor taxis, then the state will continue to treat the entire sector as a threat instead of a partner, and they'll be accused of all the things they're accused about. So let me be very direct. When a motor taxi rider is shot at point blank range over a code at a checkpoint in a country already in post-electoral crisis, several alarms should ring at once. And that is where we say, what does this incident tell us about the Republic? Number one, state legitimacy crisis. Citizens do not believe official versions, even when shown a video. They do not trust electoral results. They do not trust press releases. At that point, every rumor is more powerful than every communique. Number two, security as predation. Checkpoints are perceived less as protection and more as roadside ATMs for those in uniform. The line between state security and organized racket is blurred. Thirdly, social explosion risk. Because Meiganga showed us what happens when professional drivers decide to block a highway. Mutengene showed us what happens when frustrated people who have been left in the dark without electricity for over 9 months decide to sit down and block the Mutengene-Tiko road and show their frustration to the whole wide world. Then Douala has shown us what it looks like when thousands of motor taxis move as one body. And student frustration, unemployed youth, angry civil servants, grieving families, and you have all the ingredients for a national conflagration. On the fourth part, the economy of daily survival. A man who has 10,000 francs in his pocket, who is asked to pay 25,000 francs he does not have, may decide he has nothing left to lose. That is how revolutions have started elsewhere. One street vendor in Tunisia, one confrontation too many. So this is where civic education comes in. Because the question is not just who is wrong between the motor taxi rider and the policeman. The real question is, what kind of state do we want when the election is over? Meaning that when a new Cameroon is actually formed. Because after 43 years and the system that Ahijo left behind, that Biya seems to have perfected. President Biya seems to have perfected that system to a level where it is rotten to the core. And if by some magic wand, the current regime decides to change and want to improve the lives of Cameroonians, especially on and off the road, my question remains, what kind of state do we want when the election is over? Because we're still in a post-electoral crisis. It may not be evident on the surface, but I believe that there's a lot happening behind the scenes, and that is why the country is still not in that place where the system can go to sleep, or the regime or the ministers or those that are in office can actually go to sleep and say there is calm. And I'm saying my question remains, what kind of state do we want when the election is over? A state that lives off checkpoints, or a state that lives off justice and economic production? We cannot end this show with only outrage. We need pathways. What needs to change? Concrete proposals. Here are some concrete proposals. As I say, civic proposals that emerge from this incident. Because of course, there is going to be a new Cameroon. If not today, if not tomorrow, there is going to be a new Cameroon. And that is our belief. And we remain resolute to see that happen one day. And even in the current state of affairs, without really having a full-on digital system, because, we can't really run without creeping. Cameroon still seems to be sitting, and therefore, let's not move too fast. I know some of you believe that with computers we can do everything, but when you look at the current state of affairs, it's a long road to that. But in the meantime, we can start with basic solutions. Number 1, stop cash and carry controls. Any roadside fine should be written, a receipt produced, and it's traceable. No more envelopes in the dark, no more code, no more you know what to do. Number 2, you link fines to training, as they call it, formalization process. If a rider is not in order, no permit, no insurance, then any 25,000 francs taken from him must automatically include the cost of training, the cost of his permit and insurance, and a clear record in a database that can be accessed with a simple mobile phone. In other words, if you punish, you must also regularize, not just pocket the money. Number 3, we need to rationalize checkpoints. Publish the list of all authorized checkpoints and the purpose of each. Reduce their number. Ban spontaneous unsupervised nighttime ambush, controls that have no written order from a competent authority. I know surrogates of the regime will try to say, for security reasons, you don't need to tell people where the checkpoints are, you just need to, surprise them. No. Everywhere in the world, in democracies that deal with bigger issues like lethal bombs, weapons of mass destruction, threats to all kinds of security issues, yet the police functions without you seeing them every day on the street. There are different ways of security and surveillance. Therefore, a motorbike or moto-taxi guy carrying one passenger behind is not suddenly going to do miracles. It's not suddenly going to disappear. It's not witchcraft. Even witchcraft cannot even manifest and perform in that manner. So it's all in our brains. It is done elsewhere. Places that are really populated, densely populated. You have millions, thousands of tourists, hundreds of thousands of tourists flocking down streets of Rome. You go to Colosseum, look at people taking photographs all over the place, but it's highly secured. Go to Paris, go to anywhere in the world, come to New York, anywhere, you would see hundreds of thousands of people. But I can tell you, they are all being monitored. You will rarely see an incident. So it's not a motor-taxi bike rider roaming around the city that will carry, a lethal bomb or do something that the city cannot control and patrol without, being, anonymous or hiding in the bush. No. Patrol has to be identifiable. People need to know why they are stopped. That is the public's right to know. It is something that is enshrined in the Constitution. Number 4, clean up the security officers from the top, not just the bottom. The officer who pulled the trigger must face justice, but his hierarchy must also answer questions. What orders are given? What targets? What returns are expected from these controls? Because a bullet is rarely the act of one man alone. It is the end of a chain. The same applies to Meiganga, and everywhere we've seen incidents that require thorough investigation and, the application of the law and justice. Number 5, support the moto-taxi sector. Don't just exploit it. It is what it is at this point. it's hard for things to change overnight, for Cameroonians to all of a sudden have public transit like buses and trains. So in the meantime, as we like to say, as things are the way they are right now, expand the free or subsidized permit programs started by the mayor and other ministries. Make it easier administratively and financially for riders to be in order. Work with genuine trade unions, workers' unions, to identify criminals in their midst rather than using, unions for as political clients, because that's where political parties go to recruit and fetch candidates that would chant their name, show their banners, and then as soon as there's a crisis, they are discarded and they are banned from operating between 6 p.m. and 5 a.m. Whereas these are the same people that the regime used to show their prowess, because the incumbent, President Paul Biya, never campaigned. His effigy, not even his effigy, there were some kind of like statues put up and they were parading the streets. And it was laughable at some point, but that is ridiculous. But it ended up being what they used to justify a campaign. And bike riders, but motorbike taxis, they were the ones that championed these causes. You can't really fault them, because in their ranks, you have highly educated people with degrees, masters in their pockets, but you also have people that are surviving that don't care. You also have people that don't know better. You also have people that have been so brainwashed that it's hard for them to resist the small, 5,000, 10,000 that they are given. Because we've always told you before, each time you see the regime thriving, using young people to destroy the same society, it's because those young people sometimes don't understand that 10,000 that they are giving to you as corruption, as bribe, to go and do something heinous or to do something against another person, you may be thinking that it will last forever. No. The moment you spend it is gone. And then the system that will continue to impoverish you is that which you have used your hands and that 10,000 to create and build. Remember that. And we're saying that it's important for the sector to be assisted and be supported. And finally, transparent communication in crisis. The subdivisional officer did the right thing by coming down in person and allowing delegations to go to Laquintinie. This approach, dialogue, proof, transparency should become the standard, not the exception across Cameroon. Every time there is a situation, law enforcement order officers should take the stand, should organize a press briefing to explain to the people exactly what happened. We don't need to have surrogates of the CPDM go on different TV stations to go and explain what they don't understand. We need professionals in that sector to take the stand and explain to people exactly what happened. This incident should be described to the T in a press conference, a press briefing before the public. It is not what they say, I hear say, he said, she said. It has to be documented because it will be used for future cases and it sets a precedent. Now, we're going to close at this point. What happened in Akwa Nord is not an isolated fait divers, because from one bullet to a nation's crossroads, it's a mirror held up to our republic. In that mirror, we see a young man on a motorcycle, a police officer with a gun, 25,000 that never reaches the state, 100,000 bike riders who can paralyze a city, hospitals like Laquintinie trying to save bodies, and administrators trying to prevent an explosion. We also see a people coming out of yet another disputed election, yet another circle of repression, yet another funeral. Cameroon cannot continue to function as a chain of toll booths in uniform, from Meiganga to Douala, from the north to the littoral. At some point, the state must decide, are we going to finance ourselves by squeezing the poorest at checkpoints? Or are we going to rebuild trust, reform security forces, and invest in real development? Because one day, the bullet that shot a Moto-Taxi rider will kill a Moto-Taxi rider. And it will not just kill a man, it will kill whatever remains of the idea that the state is there to protect, not to prey. My job is not to call you to violence. My job is to give you facts, context, and questions. So I leave you with this one. In your own city, at your own checkpoint, who is protecting whom and who is robbing whom? If this show helped you think a little deeper about that, share it, discuss it at home, at a motor-taxi park, a church, the market, kitchen table, and wherever. Thank you for staying to the end. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking, and thank you for commenting and sharing your thoughts. And make sure you share within your circles so we continue to reach many, many more people. And thank you for thinking. We'll keep following the case in Douala, Meiganga, and the wider post-electoral crisis, and we'll update you about what's at stake and what is coming. Until next time, stay safe, stay alert, stay away from propaganda, stay engaged, and protect Cameroon. Until the next one, may God bless Cameroon.